Hey 6A Church, happy Monday. Hope you're off to a great start on this week. It's lunchtime, probably. At least that's generally when I try to shoot to have these up so you can watch them on your lunch break. Yeah, read the video. That's what I'd like you to do. Read the video on your lunch break. But anyway, hope you're off to a great start. We dug into Malachi chapter 1, finished out the chapter yesterday. Today, because it's such a long passage, I'm not going to read the whole passage. We're focusing on Malachi 1, 6 through 14. But I just want to read this one verse here and kind of focus on that and talk about how this applies to my relationship with God. This is verse 8, when you offer blind animals in sacrifice, is that not evil? And when you offer those that are lame or sick, is that not evil? Present that to your governor. Will he accept you or show you favor, says the Lord of hosts. And we made the point yesterday that partial obedience is disobedience with a bow on it. We're not going to do what you want, but we're going to try to kind of present what we're doing as though it's what you've asked us to do. And that's what God is talking about the Israelites. They've done. They've been making sacrifices, but they haven't been following the rules of the sacrifices. So it's only partial obedience, so they're still not obeying. And I like the phrase there. So present this to your governor. What would he do with it? And in our modern area, it'd be like presenting this to the president. You know, if the president of the United States was coming over for dinner, would you give him the lame? Would you give him, the diseased animal, or would you give him the best animal of your flock? If the president was coming over for dinner, would you just kind of, sweep up the scraps off of the floor and put them on his plate, or would you go through your cupboards and find the nicest food that you could present, that you could offer, or would you make a sacrifice so that you could go buy even nicer food than you normally eat yourself, so that you can make sure the president was getting a good food? And I think that's the correlation we need to make when we're applying this to my relationship with God. It's easy for us to kind of put God as this entity that exists outside of anything we know, but let's make a correlation. Let's look at how would we approach the president? How would we treat the president? If the president had said you need to do X, Y, Z, would we just kind of do it partially in their presence and expect that they would be okay with it? Or would we do everything that they'd asked and maybe even go above and beyond everything that had been asked and required of us? And I think that's how we need to look at our obedience of God. When God gives us something to do, we need to make sure that we are doing at the minimum, we do it all. Like the minimum of following God means we do everything God has asked us to do. That's the minimum. That's the baseline layer. For most of us, though, we never get that. We're doing the partial obedience thing. We're trying, well, God says that I should do this, but I'm going to kind of creep in under here and come up about this part of it. So God says I should love my neighbor. Well, so to me, love my neighbor means blah, blah, blah. And we dilute what God says we're supposed to do by trying to redefine it in our own terms. That's not what God expects of us. What God expects of us is to do this. This would be the baseline. This would be the standard that he set. And then anything above and beyond that is fine. We can make additional sacrifices. We can go above and beyond what has been required of us. But the problem is most of us aren't even trying to live up to the baseline requirement. We're stuck trying to justify why we're not living up to the baseline requirement. So are we still stuck in this partial obedience, or are we going to actually come and do what God has asked of us? Now, I want to turn to our verse for our church, Micah 6:8, because it has that word in there. It says, he has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? So what is required of us? This is part of the baseline that God has laid out. What God requires of us is to do justice, to love mercy, and walk humbly. So that's the requirement. That's the baseline. Anything we want to do above and beyond that, fine. But we at least have to be working to live at that baseline standard of following God, so that we're in a means of full obedience, not partial obedience. Don't partially obey and put a bow on it and try and present it to God. Obey fully and then go above and beyond that with your bow. So have a great Monday. We'll see you tomorrow for another tip.